Have you ever pondered the possibility that the world might actually be ready for the Antichrist? It's a question that, while unsettling, is rooted in biblical teachings and warrants exploration. The term Antichrist primarily appears in the letters of John, portraying a figure who denies the Father and the Son, embodying deception and opposition to Christ. The Bible also describes a period of widespread apostasy, moral decay and rebellion against God, conditions that could be interpreted as a readiness for the arrival and acceptance of the Antichrist. Coupled with predictions of false prophets performing signs and wonders to mislead even the faithful, it paints a picture of a world susceptible to the Antichrist's influence. Revelation depicts a series of cataclysmic events and the rise of a global leader, often associated with the Antichrist, commanding worship and authority over all nations. Let's delve into the biblical passages and themes that give us insight into this intriguing question. The term Antichrist primarily appears in the letters of John. It's a term that's been shrouded in mystery and intrigue throughout history, stirring up images of a sinister figure who rises in the end times. But what does the Bible actually say about this figure? The letters of John provide some of the most direct references to the Antichrist. Specifically, we see mentions of the Antichrist in 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 and 22, 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, and 2 John, verse 7. In these passages, the Antichrist is described as a figure who denies the Father and the Son. This denial is not just a simple disagreement or difference in perspective. It's a profound and fundamental refusal to accept the core tenets of Christian faith. But it doesn't stop there. The Antichrist is not just a figure of denial, he is also a figure of deception. He embodies the very essence of falsehood, distorting the truth and leading people astray. This theme of deception is a recurring motif in the biblical portrayal of the Antichrist, underscoring his role as a force of opposition against Christ. And it's this opposition that really sets the Antichrist apart. He's not just a contrarian or a skeptic, he is a figure who actively works against Christ, standing in direct opposition to his message and mission. The Antichrist seeks not just to deny Christ but to undermine him, to erode the foundations of Christian faith, and lead people away from the path of righteousness. The Antichrist, as described, is a figure of deception and opposition. But what conditions will surround his appearance? To understand that, we'll need to delve into the Bible's depiction of the world in the end times. It's a world marked by spiritual decline and moral decay, a world in which truth is distorted and faith is under siege. It's in this setting that the Antichrist will make his appearance, rising in a world that seems all too ready for his deceptive and destructive influence. The Bible paints a picture of the world before the Antichrist's coming. As we delve into the scriptures, we find vivid descriptions of the spiritual and societal landscape that will set the stage for this ominous figure's arrival. The Bible speaks of an era characterized by widespread apostasy, moral decay, and rebellion against God. These conditions are not tucked away in obscure corners of the scripture, but are prominently featured in passages speaking of the end times. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 3 and 4, we find a chilling prophecy. "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." This passage warns of a great apostasy, a falling away from faith before the appearance of the Antichrist. But apostasy is not the only condition mentioned. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24 verse 12, we find another forewarning. "And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." It speaks of a time of moral decay, where wrongdoing and lawlessness will be rampant, leading to a chilling of love and compassion among many. These conditions, apostasy and moral decay, could be interpreted as a world state that would not resist the acceptance of the Antichrist. A world where faith has diminished and morality has eroded is a world that could be easily swayed by a charismatic figure promising order, peace, and prosperity, even if these promises are rooted in deception. Furthermore, the rebellion against God mentioned in these passages indicates a spiritual defiance that could pave the way for the Antichrist. This rebellion is not merely a rejection of God's laws or moral standards, but a fundamental opposition to God himself. This points to a world that has not only strayed from faith, but actively resists the divine, providing fertile ground for the Antichrist's deceptive promises. These conditions do not merely form a backdrop for the Antichrist's coming, they are integral to his rise. A world steeped in apostasy, moral decay, and rebellion against God is a world primed for the Antichrist's deception. It is a world that, through its own spiritual decay and moral decline, has made itself ready for his arrival. Thus, the world, steeped in moral decay and rebellion, might be seen as ripe for the Antichrist's arrival. Deception plays a pivotal role in the last days. A chilling statement, but one deeply rooted in the teachings of the New Testament. As we turn the pages of the Holy Scriptures, we are repeatedly warned about the role of deception in the end times. A prominent passage that sheds light on this is found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 24 to be exact. Here we are told of false prophets and deceivers who will perform signs and wonders to mislead, if possible, even the chosen ones. Imagine that. These aren't your everyday tricksters. These are individuals or entities wielding powers capable of turning even the most devout followers astray. The Apostle Paul, too, in his second letter to the Thessalonians, warns us of a similar danger. In the 9th and 10th verses of the 2nd chapter, he speaks of the lawless one, associated with Satan, who will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and false wonders. These acts, he says, will serve unrighteous deception among those who are perishing, primarily because they refuse to love the truth and be saved. These passages paint a sobering picture. They tell us of a time when the world will be riddled with deception, a time when the line between truth and falsehood will be so blurred that even the elect could be led astray. Now, why is this important in our discussion about the Antichrist? Well, these passages suggest that this potent deception will create a world susceptible to the Antichrist's influence. The Antichrist, as we have discussed, is a figure who denies the Father and the Son, a figure of opposition and deception. In a world where truth is distorted, where signs and wonders are used to mislead people, the Antichrist could wield his deceptive influence unchallenged. In this environment, the Antichrist could rise to power, seducing humanity with beguiling words and seemingly miraculous deeds. The world, in its susceptibility to deception, could find itself not only accepting but also embracing this figure of opposition. But remember, these are not just bleak prophecies of doom. They are, above all, warnings. They are calls to vigilance, urging us to hold fast to our faith, to love the truth, and to be discerning. In the face of such potent deception, our greatest defense is the truth of the gospel, the truth about Christ, and the truth about the love of God. As we navigate through these perilous times, let us remember the words of Jesus in John chapter 8, verse 32. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. As we conclude this segment, let's ponder on this. This potent deception could make the world susceptible to the Antichrist's influence. But in the light of truth, we can stand firm, discerning the real from the deceptive, and ultimately, choosing the path that leads to life. Revelation depicts a series of cataclysmic events and the rise of a global leader. A chilling statement, but one that holds an important place in the biblical narrative. The book of Revelation, the final book of the New Testament, paints a vivid picture of the end times, a period marked by worldwide upheaval and the ascendancy of a charismatic figure who will command authority over all nations. This figure, often associated with the Antichrist, emerges in a time of global crisis. Now, what does this global crisis entail? It's a series of cataclysmic events, the likes of which humanity has never seen before. This crisis is not restricted to a single region or a group of nations. It's a global catastrophe that affects every corner of the world. The rise of this global leader, this Antichrist, is not an event that occurs in isolation. It's intricately linked to the unfolding global crisis. As the world reels under the impact of these catastrophic events, there's a power vacuum that needs to be filled. In steps the Antichrist, a charismatic leader who promises to restore order in a world that's on the brink of collapse. The Antichrist's rise to power isn't just about political or military dominance. This leader will command something more significant, something more profound. Worship. Yes, the Antichrist will demand absolute loyalty, not just as a leader, but as an object of worship. The book of Revelation tells us that he will have authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. His reach is universal, his command absolute. Now, what's fascinating is the acceptance of this global leader. Despite his blasphemous claims and demands for worship, the world doesn't resist. In fact, the Antichrist is welcomed, hailed as the solution to the global crisis. This acceptance, this readiness to embrace such a figure, is a testament to the spiritual and moral state of the world at that time. The world, in its desperation and deception, is ready for the Antichrist. The global crisis sets the stage for his emergence. It creates an environment ripe for the rise of a leader who promises stability in a time of chaos, order in a world that's falling apart. However, as the Bible warns us, this leader, this Antichrist, is not the savior he claims to be. His rise to power is a sign, a harbinger of the end times. It's a stark reminder that the world, in its current state, is ready for the Antichrist. But the question we must ask ourselves is, are we ready for what his arrival signifies? In the midst of global crisis, a figure like the Antichrist could rise to power. A sobering thought, isn't it? The world may be ready for the Antichrist, but it's our responsibility to discern the signs, to understand the times, and to prepare ourselves for what lies ahead. So, is the world actually ready for the Antichrist? As we've explored in this video, the concept of the Antichrist, as referenced in the letters of John, is not merely a figure of evil, it's a symbol of deception and opposition to Christ, a figure who denies the Father and the Son. This denial, this rejection of truth is a crucial theme in understanding the conditions that might allow for the Antichrist's arrival. The Bible speaks of a time of widespread apostasy, moral decay, and rebellion against God. This isn't a picture of a world at peace, but one in turmoil, one struggling with its own spiritual identity. It's a world that, in its confusion and spiritual decline, might not resist the appearance and acceptance of the Antichrist. Deception plays a significant role in this landscape. The New Testament warns of false prophets and deceivers who will perform signs and wonders to mislead even the elect, if possible. This isn't just a world where deception exists, it's a world where deception thrives, where the line between truth and falsehood is blurred. It's a world that may be susceptible to the influence of the Antichrist, not because of its evil, but because of its confusion. We've also considered the depiction of a global crisis in Revelation, a series of cataclysmic events and the rise of a global leader, often associated with the Antichrist. This leader commands worship and authority over all nations, a power that could only be possible in a world ready, whether through desperation or deception, for such a figure. When we say, the world is actually ready for the Antichrist, we're not suggesting a world eager for evil, but a world vulnerable to it. We're talking about a world that, due to a combination of spiritual decline, deception, and turmoil, could allow for the rise of a figure like the Antichrist. It's a world that in its struggle and confusion might be unprepared to resist such a figure. The readiness of the world for the Antichrist is a complex issue, rooted in biblical themes of deception, moral decay, and global crisis. As we navigate our own times, these themes serve as a sobering reminder of the need for vigilance and faith. In the end, understanding these themes isn't just about predicting the future or identifying the Antichrist, it's about recognizing the conditions that allow for deception and opposition to Christ to flourish. It's about maintaining vigilance in our faith, standing firm against apostasy and moral decay, and being prepared to recognize and resist the deception that may come our way. The readiness of the world for the Antichrist is a complex issue, rooted in biblical themes of deception, moral decay, and global crisis. As we navigate our own times, these themes serve as a sobering reminder of the need for vigilance and faith.